Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it happens to be. Welcome back to another IKEA Foundation Week session. We're super thrilled to be here on day 2 of IKEA Foundation Week. My name is Ryan. I'm the leader of IKEA Foundation Week and part of the communications team here at the IKEA Foundation. Thrilled to have you with us. And I'm really thrilled to have with us our very special guest who is a long-time member of the IKEA Foundation. You might be the first member of the IKEA Foundation, right?
Exactly, Ryan. Yeah, well, I can't believe it's been 12 years since Ingvar asked me to join and set up the foundation. And for somebody who had never worked for IKEA before, it's quite a challenge. Fortunately, I've been able to work very closely with IKEA and IKEA CEOs and gotten to know the company, the culture, which of course is very important because it underpins what we do. And I've also learned the fact that giving away money is not as easy as you think. If you want to do it in a responsible way, if you don't want to do it in a way you get maximum impact for the funds invested. And I feel that we really owe that to all the IKEA co-workers around the world who have worked hard to provide this kind of profits that we can actually spend to improve the lives of children and youth in poor communities around the world.
I have to say, that was a shock to me as well. When I started with the foundation, I kind of thought that, okay, shouldn't be that difficult to give away money, but it's actually pretty complicated. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. Today we're going to do a super quick introduction to the IKEA Foundation by the person who knows the IKEA Foundation the very best, Per Heggenes, CEO of the IKEA Foundation, who started the IKEA Foundation as we know it anyway, back in 2009 with Ingvar. So Per, let me bring up our very handy presentation here. Let me turn it over to you to get us started.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Well, as you know, IKEA or Ingvar essentially decided back in 1982 to give the company to a foundation because he wanted to ensure that the company would continue to operate on the same principles, the same values as he thought were absolutely critical to make the company successful also in the future. But he also wanted to do something more than just serving people who can come to the white and blue stores, yellow and blue stores, to actually buy the great quality products from IKEA. So he created a philanthropic foundation and he gave the company to the foundation. And as you know, parts of the profits every year can be spent on philanthropic purposes, spent on the people who are not able to come to the yellow and blue stores or buy any kind of products online because they simply can't afford it. If you look at the foundation today and you want to remember it with one word, you can remember it as it says here. We are in the business of creating better lives on a livable planet. And that's the whole thing. And we'll get into that in a second, what that actually means. Now, Ingvar set up the vision of creating a better everyday life for many people, and we have the same vision at the foundation. We just, as I alluded to, we would actually address a different kind of everyday life and a different kind of the many people, because the people we are helping to a better life are people who are not able to come to the stores. They wouldn't even live in a country where we have a store, probably, with a couple of exceptions. And therefore, we're trying to make sure that the many people, the concept of the many people, go beyond the customers. It goes also to all of those people around the world who are really struggling to make a living and even feed their family on a daily basis. So when we went through these years and we went from being a foundation that donated money just to really great companies for good causes, we decided that we need to look for where we can make a special difference as a foundation. And we looked through what we have done in the past, we looked through where the opportunity would be, and we looked through what it means to actually to help children to a better future. And then we decided that our mission should be to improve the lives of vulnerable children by enabling their families to create sustainable livelihoods and fight and cope with climate change. And so it's about livelihoods, it's about climate change, and we will get into that in a second. Now, we call ourselves a values-driven independent philanthropy. The values part is, of course, based on the fact that we are all operating on the same base of values as IKEA has done. We have taken the values from IKEA, applied them to philanthropy, and they underpin everything we do at Foundation as well. And the independent side has to do with the fact that we are an independent philanthropic organization. We happen to be the owner of the company, but we are separate from the company. We make our own decisions. We decide to work in areas where the need is the largest. In some cases, those are areas that overlap with IKEA countries, either on the supply chain or on the retail side. In some cases, there is no IKEA presence, but the need is enormous. So contrary to what's normally a corporate foundation, when it sits under corporation, we are an independent philanthropy. But having said that, we work very closely with the company, and you will see many examples where we are working together, such as in the climate change area, in the circular economy area, in the refugee narrative area, for example. So we have a close relationship, but at the same time, we're independent and different. So here comes another kind of difficult concept. We are a strategic philanthropy, and we focused on increasing family income and protecting the planet. What does that mean? Well, that means that we do grant making in concentrated in few areas that would be few what we call intervention areas, the type of investments we make, and few areas when it comes to geography where we operate, because we can't be everywhere. We can't be there, do everything for everyone around the world. That's not going to work. It's not going to get us focused. It's not going to get us the necessary social return on investments. So that means that we aim for what we call systems change. It's a difficult word as well, but we'll get back to that in a second. So we aim at driving system change. That means driving permanent change in areas where we see the need for change. And that means that we also need to build our grant making on what we call a strong body of evidence. That means we need to understand what works and what doesn't work. We need to take risk and make investments in areas where we're not sure what's going to work, and we will document that evidence and use that evidence as a basis for scaling up, making the interventions available to many more people, and also creating that evidence, documenting that evidence, and give it to others who have more money than us who could scale it up, such as governments, for example. So all of our funding is designed for maximizing the impact. So we're looking at what is the impact of what we do, and where can we take this, and how can we get the best bang for the buck, as some will say. And we do all this because we believe that the two greatest threats to children's future are really the climate change that we're seeing, and the poverty, not being able to build a life in the future for themselves because they don't really have the access to work and not the access to making money for themselves and building their future.
And Per, I just want to jump in here really quickly, because this is probably one of the things when I started with the IKEA Foundation that was the most impactful for me. You know, everything about IKEA and the IKEA Foundation has so much depth to it once you get into it. Think of a foundation, you might think, okay, they focus on this piece or that piece, but the IKEA Foundation focuses on quite a lot, and really trying to create that big change, right? I mean, you're
So we try, So we try to address some of the biggest issues in society, and we try to really drive down and drill down and figure out what does it take to create permanent change. That's very different to being a foundation that gives a good amount of money to good causes, to good organizations, because you can do that, and that's going to be beneficial to those organizations, and it's going to create value, but it's not necessarily going to drive big change. So this has to do with the word of sustainability. You create sustainable change. You take change that we don't go back to the old, but we are in a new format, in a new mode, where we can see more people benefiting from the investments we are making. So it's like a leverage. It's like a leverage, if you like.
Yeah. So I just want to draw the attention of coworkers to this, because this is one of those things that I think you can be really proud of. There's a lot of thought and energy going into this to be able to solve some of these big issues, not just to be able to put a little bit of money into some of these issues, but to be able to make a dent in some of these big systems issues. And I guess that's what we'll talk about next when we're talking about this focus on systemic change.
Yeah, so systemic change is what we do as a strategic philanthropy. And we have a very few we have a small set of goals, and they're very clear what we want to achieve. And in order to figure out how to achieve that, we build something called a theory of change. Theory of change is really trying to explain to ourselves and to the outside world what needs to happen in order for a situation to change permanently, as opposed to just providing aid so that people can eat every day and kids can go to school, but the fundamental problem, the underlying problem, is not really addressed. So that theory of change is important, and we build it on as much evidence as available. And if we don't have the evidence, we will create a theory of change and test it and generate that evidence to really understand what works. And that means that we have specialists on board who are only focused on doing this, making sure that every grant we make is designed in the way that we can learn from it, and we can learn from ourselves, and we can learn and share that learning with others. So it's really about looking at what are the underlying barriers for change. Why is the situation not good? And what is driving the negativity of that situation? Why? What can we move away to? And what kind of barriers can we remove in order to drive permanent change? And then we look at what are the levers, what are the pathways where we can actually drive that change? What does it take to get there? And that will be reflected in the theory of change. And then we, of course, look at allies, because there's only so much we can do as an individual foundation. We look for partners. We look for not only partners to implement what we do, because as you know, we don't do anything in the field. We only fund the partners that are able to actually do the work in the field. But we also look at allies, organizations, foundations that actually are able to work with us, so we can work together in the real IKEA spirit of togetherness, and we can probably achieve results faster, and we can get more efficiently towards the goals. So that's what systemic change is all about.
Yeah, it's always inspiring to see that this much goes into tackling these issues. And now I guess the question that you might be asking yourself if you're watching this presentation is, so what is it that we're actually focusing on? Yeah,
so let's get down to the really concrete two areas that we talk about, climate and livelihoods. And I like this photo because you see the solar panels in the back, and you see the vegetables in the front, and a happy person who seems to have made some progress in life. So what we are doing, as I said, is focusing on helping the world reach the 1.5 or stay within the 1.5 degree target that was set by global leaders in the Paris conference about 5 years ago. Because if we can't stay within the 1.5 degrees of level of global warming, we will not have a livable planet for our children and grandchildren. So if you look at our two themes, the climate action theme is really about mitigating global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. And that's the most urgent priority for us in the next 5 years. When you think about it, we have said as a global community, we need to reach what we call net zero target by 2050. But in order to do that, we actually need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 50% by 2030. That's in 9 years. That's not a long time. That's a very short amount of time. And great organizations like IKEA has decided to be carbon positive by 2030. That's a huge step and a huge commitment, but that's not the case for all, and therefore we have to really keep pushing. On the other side, we work on the livelihoods development, enabling people in living in poverty to actually have a job, build a job for themselves, build an income, and therefore have a sustainable long-term future. We know that with increased population growth in some of these areas, we need to find jobs. We need to create entrepreneurs. We need to enable entrepreneurs to create jobs for themselves in order to be able to build a life in the communities where they are. So in the livelihood side, for us, renewable energy is important, partly because renewable energy is climate friendly. You know, it's non-emitting because it's solar and wind mainly, but if we provide renewable energy to people living in poor communities in rural areas where there's no access to energy or very limited access to energy, we can do that also in a productive sense, so they can actually build businesses for themselves and make income. And the same thing, we try to focus on what we call regenerative agriculture, build resilience, help smallholder farmers to be successful, increase their yield, but do it in a natural way that not only increases their yield, but also protects the planet and the environment. Then, as I said, entrepreneurship and enterprise development is important because there won't be enough jobs for people to go to. There won't be enough companies creating jobs for people. So people will have to create their own jobs. And that means supporting entrepreneurship and enterprise development. And finally, as you know, Ryan, and this is how you came to us, this was our first engagement together was in the refugee setting in Jordan. We are very focused on refugee inclusion, as we said, that we actually moved refugees from being idle in a camp, not being able to work, not being able to move, to actually be seen as resources and assets and be integrated into the community and ultimately becoming self-reliant. Give them a chance to start a new life in a new environment because they were originally forced to flee their homes because of conflict and persecution.
Absolutely. And I like when you just talk about self-reliance there, because the whole livelihood section to me, when I sum it up, and I might be oversimplifying here, but it really is about helping people help themselves, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to level the playing field, right?
Well, that's the only way to have what we call a sustainable solution, is you need to help people to help themselves, because the alternative is to keep providing aid and make sure they stay alive, but at the same time, that's not sustainable. We can't do that forever. The needs are increasing, and people actually want to be self-sufficient. That's a human psyche. You really want to be independent. You want to be able to feed your family. You want to be able to live a life in peace, and feel that you are accomplishing something. And that's what we try to help people to do.
So really closing the inequality gap. I also just want to take a second to remind everyone that we've created some videos that really give you a very personal look at some of these issues. 5 videos talking about focus areas. You can find them on IKEAFoundation.org this week, and that'll give you a really good idea as well as to the work that we're doing. But we've still got a few other focus areas to talk about, right?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the refugee livelihoods, the fact that we want to create pathway for refugees to become self-reliant, both in the urban settings and in the rural settings, and we talked about the entrepreneurship side, where we try to focus on what we call green entrepreneurship. So everything we do as a foundation, if you summarize, is really working to help the world stay within what we call the planetary boundaries, that we're not going beyond what the planet can actually sustain, whether it's about utilization of resources, it's about pollution, it's about water, energy, So everything we do at the foundation is to help not save the planet, because we don't need to save the planet. The planet will save itself. The question is whether we can live on the planet, and we try to do our part to actually make sure that people can live on the planet also in future generations. And then, of course, we have one part which we call the global emergency systems. And there are emergencies around the world where people need aid immediately to survive. There can be conflict, but it can also be global disaster caused by climate change, caused by flooding, earthquakes, whatever droughts. And we try to do this in a different way than many others. We try to focus on what we call the silent emergencies, those that you don't read about in the media, and those that you don't read about the media don't get any funding and therefore will not be helped. That's the problem. So we work with partners who actually go into those areas. And then secondly, we think it's really important to empower local organizations, because it's more effective to prepare local organizations in the areas that are disaster prone to actually help themselves when disaster strikes. So that's why disaster preparedness is an important part of what we do. We help create what we call resilience, help communities prepare for forecasted disaster and build that capacity in local communities. So if you look at all this, you can see it all comes together in a long-term focus and a short-term focus. Climate overlaps with livelihoods in the way we work. There's a climate element to everything we do, as well as a livelihood element. And as I said, we have the short-term focus on 1.5 degrees, because if we can't stay within 1.5 degrees maximum global warming, we will have so many other challenges in the world that it's going to be very difficult for us to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a really good kind of intro to what we're doing. Of course, there's so much depth here, right? I mean, there's so much more when it comes to it. And again, when I started the foundation, just trying to understand how much thought goes into the grant giving, how much thought goes into choosing these issues. It's really quite a lot. Before we get into a couple of questions, and we do have a few, I just want to also take a moment to remind you or let you know, if you haven't seen it already, that we've launched a new app. It's called the IKEA Foundation AR app, and it's available at ikeafoundation.org/app. And it's an augmented reality app. So you can quite literally step into our world, as you can see here in the lovely portal in front of me. And it gives you a chance to check out these 5 stories that I was talking about, and very literally see what they're doing in their different worlds. So if you have a chance, check out the augmented reality app, learn a little bit about the 5 different partners that we have that are representing 5 of our different focus areas here at the IKEA Foundation. Really cool. So Per, a couple questions have come up. One that comes a lot through the comments is, how do we choose our partners? How do people get chosen to work with the IKEA Foundation?
Yeah, so we have teams in the foundation who would search for the partners that we think can actually provide the best possible service to us, can create the best possible results in the most efficient way. So it's really about seeking out those partners actively within the different areas we operate. So we have a portfolio that focuses on regenerative agriculture, for example, and that means that they look for partners that can actually drive the concept of regenerative agriculture in the countries where we operate. So it's not we're not in a foundation with people apply or search for money or put in proposals just unsolicited. We are out there looking for the best partners to work with in order to ensure that we make the most out of the money that we have been generally allocated from IKEA, because of the great work that all the co-workers are doing every day.
And speaking of the money that is generously allocated from IKEA, how much money are we talking about here? What have we done, and what are we looking to do in the future?
Well, so far, since I started 12 years ago, when we actually set up the foundation as it is today, as an operating foundation with an administration and a team that basically drives grant making, we have granted 1.4 billion euros to partners around the world, impact hundreds of millions of kids in the countries where we operate. We have currently a budget for the foundation that is, the core budget is at 200 million euros, divided up into the different areas where we operate. But lately also the board said, we're really concerned about the fact that we are not cutting carbon or greenhouse gases quickly enough in the world, and cutting carbon and greenhouse gases today. A ton today is more important than a ton in 5 years or 10 years. So we want you to do more in that area. So they said we're going to make another $1 billion euros available in the next 5 years for programs that are specifically targeted towards cutting greenhouse gas emissions. So we have a lot of work to do as a foundation to try to scale up our activities and actually scale up our grant making to 400 million euros a year from now on.
Yeah, I mean that's quite a jump, and considering that we are a very, let's say, cost-conscious organization as well, we have, I think, about 50 co-workers within the foundation. Is that right?
Yes, and I think that means that we are definitely the most cost-efficient foundation in the world when it comes to how we deal with this amount of money with few co-workers. So we have to be very efficient at what we do. We can only do things in a certain way in order to keep the workload at an acceptable level. But the board and Ingvar always wanted us to be very cost efficient and make sure that most of the money goes to the people we're trying to help. So we're trying to keep the administration costs at the minimum, really.
And you say one of the largest foundations in the world, and I believe that the number right now is the 9th largest foundation in Europe. So that's nothing to cough about.
I think with our added billion, we're going to be much farther up than that. But it doesn't really matter, because what really matters to me is the impact we create for the people we're trying to help. And where we are in the ranking is less of an importance. I know that we make a huge impact on many people, and I know that IKEA coworkers are interested in hearing more about that, and also making sure that the customers understand how some of the profits are being spent. So that's why we do IKEA Foundation Week.
Absolutely. Well, Per, listen, this was a really super intro. Thanks so much. I want to remind everyone again, on IKEAFoundation.org, you can check out the videos about IKEA Foundation Week. There's so much happening this week. Lots of live events. You can check us out on social media, all these different things. So IKEAFoundation.org is where to go. IKEAFoundation.org/app has the app. And later today, we're talking about that really, really important issue, trying to make sure that we have a livable plan with Inca Group CEO Jesper Wordin and climate leader Liz McKeon, who's, of course, working for the IKEA Foundation. So that's pretty exciting. Any closing thoughts, Per?
I just want to thank people for watching and for showing interest in the foundation. We can only do this because of all the hard work that you guys do, and that you are successful in all the markets you operate. And it's fantastic to be able to do this on the back of a strong brand like IKEA, because IKEA is doing so much important work in the area of sustainability, circular economy, any renewable energy, what have you. So it's just a real pleasure to be able to do this on the back of such a strong brand that makes an impact everywhere in the world. So thank you for watching.
I'll echo Per's thanks, and hope you join us for the rest of the week. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell coworkers, tell customers. This is IKEA Foundation Week, and we're so excited to be able to share this with all of you. With that, we hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of the week, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.